There's a mistake that English learners make all the time, and what makes it interesting is that the mistake sounds completely logical from the learner's point of view. A learner might say something like, "I'm looking forward to see you," and honestly, you can understand exactly why they built the sentence that way. They hear the word to, and English trains them to expect a verb after it, so their brain naturally starts thinking about patterns like to go, to meet, or to talk. From that perspective, "I'm looking forward to see you" feels reasonable. But to native speakers, the sentence sounds wrong immediately, even though the meaning is perfectly clear.
And the reason gets into something deeper about how English works. A lot of expressions in English stop behaving like separate words and start behaving more like single language units.
Hello, I'm Teacher Sammy.
And I'm Jonathan.
This is English in Asia, where we talk about how English is actually used in conversation and real life, not just what grammar books say in isolation.
And today we're looking at the phrase look forward to, which is one of the most common expressions English learners use, especially in conversation and email writing. But it's also one of those expressions that creates mistakes even for learners who are already fairly advanced. I think one reason this phrase causes so many problems is that learners usually encounter it very early, but they often memorize it without really understanding how the structure works.
Yes, they learn sentences like, "I'm looking forward to seeing you," and they remember the general meaning, but they may not notice why English uses seeing there instead of see. Later, when they try to create their own sentences, they start applying patterns from other parts of English.
And that's where things start going wrong.
Exactly, because in many situations in English, when learners see the word to, they expect an infinitive afterward. That expectation becomes very strong over time. So when they build a sentence like, "I'm looking forward to see you," they're not making a random mistake. They're applying a pattern that usually works in other situations.
And honestly, this kind of thing happens constantly in language learning. Learners understand most of a structure correctly, but one small assumption pulls the sentence in the wrong direction.
Right, and with look forward to, the important thing is realizing that native speakers process it almost like one complete expression. They are not mentally separating look, forward, and to every time they use it.
The phrase already carries its own meaning.
Exactly. When somebody says, "I'm looking forward to the weekend," nobody imagines a person physically looking in a direction. The phrase simply means that somebody feels happy or excited about something in the future.
And once you start understanding the expression that way, the grammar starts making more sense too.
Actually, this is probably a good moment to pause for a second, because a lot of listeners may still feel uncertain about which version sounds natural.
Especially because both versions sound emotionally believable if you're thinking about them from pure grammar logic.
That's right.
What's interesting is that once learners really notice this pattern, they suddenly start hearing it everywhere.
Yes, especially in emails. English speakers use this expression constantly in professional communication. You'll see sentences like, "I look forward to hearing from you," or "We look forward to working with you." And those sentences sound completely natural to native speakers.
But if somebody writes, "I look forward to hear from you," it immediately feels awkward.
Exactly. The meaning is still clear, but the structure feels wrong because native speakers expect the expression to continue in a different way.
I think this connects to a much bigger issue in language learning too. A lot of learners try to build sentences one piece at a time from grammar rules, but fluent speakers often rely on larger patterns that they've heard thousands of times.
Yes, native speakers use chunks of language constantly. That's one reason fluent speech feels so fast to learners. People are not constructing every sentence from zero each time they speak. Very often, they're pulling familiar patterns out automatically.
And when a learner changes one part of a very familiar pattern, native speakers notice it immediately, even if the sentence is understandable.
Exactly. That's why small mistakes sometimes sound much bigger than learners expect them to sound. If this kind of explanation is useful for you, subscribe. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments.
There's another interesting thing about look forward to. The phrase changes tone depending on the situation.
Very much. If somebody says, "I'm really looking forward to seeing you tomorrow," that sounds warm and personal. But if somebody says, "We look forward to discussing this matter further," now the phrase feels much more formal and professional.
Almost like business email English.
Exactly. Same core expression, but a very different emotional feeling depending on context.
I think learners sometimes underestimate how important that kind of tone difference is. They focus so heavily on whether a sentence is technically correct.
Right, but natural English is also about emotional tone, rhythm, and context. Two grammatically correct sentences can create completely different impressions.
There's another mistake learners sometimes make with this phrase. They say things like, "I very look forward to it."
Yes, and that word order sounds unnatural immediately. A native speaker would usually say something like, "I'm really looking forward to it." Or in more formal English, somebody might say, "I very much look forward to it."
And those two versions even feel different emotionally.
Exactly. One feels conversational and personal, the other feels much more formal.
One important thing here is that native speakers will usually understand these mistakes without difficulty.
Oh, definitely. If somebody says, "I'm looking forward to see you," nobody is confused. But even when communication succeeds, the sentence still sounds non-native. And over time, those small patterns affect how natural somebody's English feels overall.
So really, this episode is not only about one phrase.
No, it's about recognizing that English contains many expressions that behave like complete units. And if learners try to rebuild those expressions entirely from grammar logic, strange sentences start appearing.
And once learners begin noticing those larger patterns, English often starts feeling more predictable.
Exactly.
So if listeners remember one thing from today, it should probably be this. Don't think about look forward to one word at a time.
Think about it as one complete expression, and after that expression, English normally moves into a noun or an ing form, not an infinitive verb.
Subscribe if you want more discussions about how English is actually used. And if you've heard a phrase that never quite made sense to you, leave it in the comments.
Thanks for listening to English in Asia.
And we'll see you next time.
If this kind of video is useful for you, please subscribe, and if you have a question, leave it in the comments.